So how do we actually deploy that leadership throughout an organization? And the quality management principles that are available as a brochure for free download from the ISO website, or they are also mentioned in the ISO 9000 Fundamentals and Terminology standard. They talk about how to deploy the principle of leadership by communicating the mission and the vision and the strategy and the policies of the organization, right from the top level down to the operational level. What we know in Japan as Hoshinkanri, and that's very, very familiar, I think, here within Japan. Now, ISO 9001 doesn't actually require an organization to have a vision and mission statement, but they are very useful things to have. They provide that unity of purpose. If everybody can understand what is the strategic direction that the organization is intending to follow. They're not requirements of ISO 9001. The requirement in ISO 9001 is to have a quality policy and objectives that align with the organization's strategic policy and objectives. ISO 9004, the guideline standard, talks about having the development of the organizational culture. More about that later. The organizational culture and the vision and mission, which is then deployed via the various policies and objectives. We need to create and sustain those shared values in our organization. Fairness, ethical models of, at all levels, a culture of trust and integrity. You know, Dr. Deming, one of Dr. Deming's 14 points, talked about driving out fear within an organization. It talked about not robbing employees of their right to be proud of what they do. We need to instill that as a leadership element, making sure that people know what we expect of them, rewarding good behavior, rewarding good performance, pointing out, of course, if there are deficiencies, if things go wrong, looking for ways to improve, providing training when people maybe aren't understanding the process the way that they should understand it and carry it out. But not just pointing the finger and blaming people. Asking ourselves as leaders, why didn't that person carry out the process according to the requirements? Maybe they didn't have the right equipment. Who's responsible for providing the equipment? We are as leaders. Maybe they didn't have the appropriate training. Who's responsible for providing training? Leadership. Maybe they didn't have the appropriate technical resources. Who's responsible for providing the resources? Leadership. And so it all comes back to leadership taking responsibility for the quality management system. If people aren't doing the right things, then we are the people who hired them, we are the people as leaders who have to provide them with their motivation, who have to provide them with the resources that they need to be able to do a good job. And so that leadership has to filter through all the different levels of the organization. And again, this is one of the principles that is very, very strongly emphasized, particularly in clause 5 of ISO 9001 that talks about leadership. Out of good leadership comes good employee engagement and the engagement of people throughout the organization. And that's the third quality management principle that we'll talk about in the next video.